Reality is a story your brain tells you. Think about the last time someone didn't reply to your message. Maybe it happened yesterday. Maybe it happened an hour ago. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then, almost without noticing, your mind began writing. Maybe they're upset with me. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe they don't value me anymore. Within minutes, your emotions had already changed. Not because you discovered a new fact, but because your brain quietly finished a story. Here's the strange part. Most of us believe our suffering begins when something happens, but often it begins a moment later. It begins when the mind decides what that event means, and those two things are not the same. Someone didn't reply. That is an event. They don't care about me. That is a conclusion. Yet once that conclusion appears, it no longer feels like a conclusion. It feels like reality. That may be one of the most important illusions of the human mind. We rarely experience the world exactly as it is. We experience the version our brain has constructed from it. And once you truly understand this, you begin to notice something unsettling. Many of the battles you fight every day are not battles with reality itself. They are battles with the first story your brain created about reality. So why does the brain do this? Right now, it probably feels as if you are seeing the world directly. The room around you seems complete. The sounds feel immediate. The people around you appear obvious. It all feels effortless. But your brain is not receiving a finished world. Your eyes do not send a complete picture. They send fragments of light. Your ears do not send meaning. They send vibrations. Your skin does not send certainty. It senses pressure, temperature, and movement. Everything else must be interpreted. The objects you recognize, the faces you trust, the dangers you fear, the intentions you assign, the emotions you attach. Every second, your brain is trying to answer one basic question. Given the limited information I have, what is most likely happening? Notice the wording. Not what is happening, but what is most likely happening. Your brain is constantly making educated guesses because it has to. Imagine you are walking home late at night. You hear footsteps behind you. Immediately, your breathing changes. Your muscles tighten. Your attention sharpens. Why? Because your brain refuses to wait. It cannot collect every piece of evidence before deciding what to do. If human beings had waited for certainty before reacting to danger, many of our ancestors would not have survived long enough to become our ancestors. So evolution made a trade: speed instead of certainty, prediction instead of perfection. And most of the time, that trade works beautifully. Your brain predicts words before people finish speaking. It predicts where a moving object will be before it gets there. It adjusts your balance before you fall. Prediction makes ordinary life possible. But prediction also creates one of the deepest psychological traps we experience. Because once your brain predicts what is happening, it begins looking for evidence that the prediction is correct. Not because it wants to deceive you, but because certainty feels safer than uncertainty. And this changes far more than what you see. It changes what events mean. A neutral expression becomes rejection. A delayed reply becomes abandonment. Silence becomes hostility. A simple mistake becomes proof that you are not good enough. Nothing outside has changed. Only the story inside. And here is where it becomes personal. The longer you repeat the same interpretation, the less it feels like an interpretation. It begins to feel like the only possible truth. And once that happens, the story is no longer merely describing your reality. It is beginning to shape it. But prediction is not the deepest problem. Your brain does not only ask, what is happening? It immediately asks another question. What does this mean? And that question changes everything. Imagine two people receiving exactly the same message. We need to talk. For one person, it may mean nothing unusual. Maybe it is about work. Maybe it is about dinner. Maybe it is simply a conversation. But for someone who has been abandoned before, those 4 words can feel like the beginning of disaster. Their heart races. Their mind jumps ahead. I'm about to lose someone. The message has not changed. The meaning has. And once the meaning changes, emotional reality changes with it. This is why 2 people can walk away from the same conversation carrying completely different worlds inside them. One remembers criticism. The other remembers honesty. One remembers rejection. The other remembers misunderstanding. The facts may be shared. The meanings are not. And here is the dangerous part. Your brain rarely says, "This is only my interpretation." Instead, it says, "This is what happened." That small difference shapes an enormous part of emotional life. You do not simply react to events. You react to the meaning attached to them. A delayed reply becomes, "I'm not important." A mistake becomes, "I'm a failure." Someone else's bad mood becomes, "It must be because of me." Notice what has happened. In a matter of seconds, your brain has not only explained the event, it has explained you. And once an interpretation becomes personal, it becomes much harder to question. Because now, you are no longer defending an opinion. You are defending an identity. This is where the story stops being something you think. It becomes something you believe you are. Most people feel that they know themselves. They say, "I'm an independent person. I'm just shy. I've never been confident. I'm the responsible one. I'm not good with people." These statements feel like facts. But where did they come from? You were not born believing them. No child enters the world thinking, "I'm not interesting enough," or "I always disappoint people." Those are stories. Stories repeated so often that they stopped sounding like stories. Imagine a path through a forest. The first person walks through it, and almost nothing changes. Then another person follows. Then another. Months later, the grass is gone. Years later, there is a clear trail. Eventually, people forget there was ever a forest there. The trail simply feels like the natural way to walk. Your mind works in much the same way. Every time you interpret an experience in the same direction, the path becomes easier to follow. I failed. Maybe that happened once. I always fail. Now the path is forming. I'm a failure. Now the path has become an identity. And once an identity is formed, your brain begins protecting it. Not because it is necessarily true, because it is familiar. This is one of the strangest things about being human. We do not only defend what makes us happy. Sometimes we defend what makes us predictable. A person may remain in a relationship that has been hurting them for years, not only because they love the other person, but because leaving would require becoming someone they have never been before. Someone may reject an opportunity, not because they lack ability, but because success would force them to abandon the sentence, "People like me don't do things like that." Sometimes the prison is not built by other people. Sometimes it is built by a sentence you have repeated to yourself for 20 years. And the stories that limit us rarely sound dramatic. They are usually quiet. "This isn't for me. I'm just not creative. People never really understand me. This is simply who I am." The more often you hear that voice, the more invisible it becomes. Until one day, you mistake the narrator for yourself. But what if that voice is not your identity? What if it is only your oldest explanation? And if explanations can change, perhaps the person you believe yourself to be is not finished yet. But if all of this is true, one question remains. How do you stop living inside the first story your brain creates? The answer is simple. Not easy, but simple. The next time something upsets you, Do not begin by asking, "Why did this happen to me?" Ask something smaller. What actually happened? Then ask, what meaning did my mind add? Those two questions create distance between reality and interpretation. Someone interrupted you. That happened. They don't respect me. That may be true, but it may also be your first explanation. Someone did not reply. That happened. They don't care about me. Perhaps. Or perhaps your mind completed the story before reality had a chance to answer. This does not mean your feelings are wrong. Your feelings are real. They deserve to be understood. But feelings are not always evidence. Sometimes they are evidence of an old story trying to explain a new situation. That distinction matters, because dismissing every feeling would make you blind. But believing every interpretation would make you trapped. Wisdom lies somewhere between those two extremes. It does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean doubting every instinct. It means learning to pause between what happened and the meaning your mind immediately creates. Inside that pause, something remarkable becomes possible. Curiosity replaces certainty. Understanding replaces judgment. Choice replaces habit. You are no longer trapped inside the first story your brain tells you. You become the person who can examine it. So the next time your mind says, "They don't care," ask, "What else could this mean?" When it says, "I always fail," ask, "Is this a fact or a familiar path?" When it says, "This is simply who I am," ask, "Who would I become if I stopped repeating that sentence?" Perhaps reality has never been as simple as we hoped. Every one of us moves through the world carrying invisible stories. Stories about ourselves. Stories about other people. Stories about what love means, what success means, what failure means. Most of those stories were never consciously chosen. But from this moment on, some of them can be consciously questioned. Your brain will always write the first draft of reality. That is what it evolved to do. But the first draft is not the final version. Growing wiser may not mean changing the world around you. It may mean becoming a little less certain that the first story in your mind is the only story that could possibly be true. Reality is a story your brain tells you, but it is not a story you must believe without question. You can examine it. You can revise it. And sometimes that small act of revision is where freedom begins. Thank you for watching.